Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, April the 24th, 2023. Today I want to talk about genocide. Genocide is the killing of a race or an ethnic group. And April the 24th is a very important and somber day in Armenia because it is Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. This is because the genocide of the Armenian population of Turkey began, symbolically at least, on April the 24th, 1915. Now, I don't know a great deal about this genocide, but from what I can gather, at the end of 1914, Turkey got involved in the First World War and promptly attacked Russia, and to begin with, did really badly. And Turkey blamed Armenians for helping Russia, for not having loyalty to Turkey, and this was a pretext for the genocide. And genocide, we're talking about between 600,000 and 1.5 million people killed. I mean, that is huge. And an order was given by Talat Pasha, who was the Turkish Minister of Interior, to arrest a group of Armenian intellectuals in Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul. And this order started being carried out at 8 p.m. on the 24th of April 2015. So we actually have a horoscope for the start of the Armenian genocide, and it's quite an accurate horoscope. So I thought today, as it is Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, that we look at this horoscope and we see if we can find anything. I haven't specifically chosen this chart because it really symbolizes a genocide. I'm just taking a chart, seeing if we can find anything, seeing maybe it doesn't fit the event. But anyway, I thought it was important. I think it's important to do that. Anyway, so let's look at the chart. So the picture I've put up there is of a memorial in Armenia to the victims of the genocide. So that's Hitler's chart. The reason I was looking at Hitler's chart is because I was just checking that he had Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and that comes up later with reference to the genocide. So this is the chart of the genocide. The first thing that comes to mind is the fact that the moon is on the mid-heaven. Moon on the mid-heaven doesn't immediately strike one as being the symbolism of genocide, and it's moon on Regulus, the royal star. Now, I think this might be more important than it looks, this moon on the midheaven, because it links with a 1914 eclipse. So the eclipse I want to look at is this one here. I think it was it was an eclipse, and it took place on August the 21st, 1914. So it took place over 6 months before the genocide. So I've set this chart for Constantinople. Now this eclipse is important, but because it's on Regulus. This is the royal star at late Leo, and of course, this eclipse symbolized the beginning of the First World War. Okay, for some countries the First World War had already started, but the royal star, you think the First World War led to the destruction of many royal houses, the royal house in Germany, in Russia, Austria-Hungary, and I think in Turkey as well. My knowledge of Turkish history is very minimal. So that was what the royal star, that eclipse on the royal star, royalty was eclipsed, and 4 years later, Saturn was at 29 Leo, I think in November 1918. As the First World War was coming to an end, Saturn moved onto this new moon, and this new moon was like a mine, like a time bomb that had been laid, and then Saturn appeared 4 years later, and that's when all of these royal houses finally collapsed with the end of the First World War. Although I think in Russia it had perhaps happened a bit earlier. So this eclipse is set for Constantinople. Now, Turkey entered the First World War on October the 31st, 1914. And you can see this kind of fits that quite well. You've got Mars, the planet of war, is exactly on the midheaven. That is powerfully symbolic of a country about to enter a war. And again, you've got this eclipse on Regulus, really saying that rulers soon enough are going to lose their position. So we need to remember this eclipse, 2735 Leo, because when we look at the moment when the order of the Turkish interior minister was carried out at 8 o'clock on April the 24th, 1915, we can see this moon configures again. That moon is on the degree of Regulus. So I kind of think that sort of fits quite well. So what else is going on in this chart? In a broader sense, we have a reminder, Pluto at 0 degrees Cancer. Okay, Pluto had been at 0 degrees Cancer for some time, and Pluto in Cancer, Cancer is about the nation. Pluto is about what we're obsessed with. Cancer is a very clannish sign. So with Pluto in Cancer, this was a time when people got obsessed about their belonging, about their nation, about their loyalties. And that's why I think so many people were prepared to die for their countries. It also perhaps made people hostile towards minorities. Cancer is a clannish sign. I'm Turkish, you're Armenian. I believe in Britain, I believe in Britain, for example, we don't call them German Shepherds, we call them Alsatians. And the reason we don't call them German Shepherds, I believe, is because in the First World War, everything German was hated. German Shepherds got kicked in the street, so they had to change their name to Alsatians. Alsace being an area in eastern France, which is borders on Germany. So perhaps that's what that Pluto in Cancer symbolizes, all those millions of young men who are prepared to die for their country, and in certain situations incredible intolerance, which in this case, in Turkey's case, led to genocide. So if you look at the ascendant, it's at 17 Scorpio, which is on the midpoint of Mars and it's on the midpoint of Mars and Saturn. And as I keep saying, Mars and Saturn is the death pair. So it's not surprising that the ascendant was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint at the moment, the symbolic moment when the genocide started. Now, one thing I do want to mention about this, which is kind of weird and a bit uncanny, is the position of some of the hypothetical planets. So I'm just going to complicate the chart by throwing in the positions of the hypotheticals. So let's see, there we go. And the hypothetical I'm really interested in is this one, Kronos. Kronos is a planet that's specifically connected with government, and I really like that because we have, in traditional astrology, we don't really have a planet that's really connected with government. Yeah, we have Saturn, and Kronos is kind of similar to Saturn, but it is government. And Kronos is on the, there is, you can't quite see this, but it's making a 45-degree aspect to the Mars Hades midpoint. So Kronos, what is government up to? What is government doing in April 1915? Well, government is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, is on the Mars-Hades midpoint. And what I want to do is I just want to read you what Witte says about Kronos on the Mars-Hades midpoint, because it's really quite, sorry, I got that wrong. I got that completely wrong. It's Kronos on the Hades Vulcanus midpoint. There's Vulcanus, the planet of great power. There's Hades, the planet of death. And there is Kronos on the midpoint. So what does it mean when Kronos is on the Hades Vulcanus midpoint? So I'm looking at Alfred Witte's rules for planetary pictures. Hades Vulcanus. It's worth waiting for. It's good. I mean, I'm not good. It's just pretty amazing what Witte came up with for this. And he described Kronos on the Hades Vulcanus midpoint as gigantic crimes and evil deeds, heavy oppression and suppression by governments and ruling powers. There you go. Gigantic crimes and evil deeds. That kind of sums up the Armenian Genocide. Now, one chart I would quickly want to look at before I move on to today's astrology is the chart of Talat Pasha. Now, Talat Pasha was a minister of the interior. He was a person who, on April the 24th, 1915, signed the order. Then, when it was carried out, that was when the genocide was started. So this guy was a bit of a monster. And if we look at his chart, we notice that he had his Mars-Saturn midpoint. There's his Mars. Can you see his Mars is at 20 Leo? His Saturn is at 20 Aquarius. The Mars-Saturn midpoint is therefore at around 15 Taurus Scorpio, which means that his Mars-Saturn midpoint makes a 45-degree, 135-degree aspect to the Aries point. And when you've got Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, if you're in the wrong place or if you have a lot of power, people with Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint can cause huge amount of damage. This is the person that in many respects initiated the Armenian Genocide. Hitler had Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So of course you link Hitler with the Holocaust during the Second World War. And some say that Hitler was indeed influenced by the Armenian Genocide because, the Germans were able to look at the Armenian Genocide and say, hey, no one really cared about that, so we can do the same thing. I'm not sure if that's actually historically true. But there's the Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, I should mention that Princess Diana had Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And with her, it manifested in a completely different way. She died in public, in that tunnel, in a car crash, and the whole world kind of saw her dying, so, or was aware of her death, and was still concerned about it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Don't forget about it. As many as 1.6 million people died as a result of the genocide. It happened again, and it will happen again, and it will happen again if we don't do something about it. So, it just shows how awful humans can be. That sounds a bit trite, but yes, it was a gigantic crime. So, as far as the astrology for today is concerned, that is a rather crowded chart because I put in all the hypotheticals. The moon is in late Gemini. There it is, moving into Cancer. So it's a time of change. We're moving from a situation where we're sort of very analytical and looking at the details and the facts, and our brains whirring away. And we're moving to Cancer, so we're about to move into a more emotional way of being. I should also like to point out that Venus is exactly 30 degrees from Mars. Now, it's called in astrology a semi-sextile, and traditionally the books are quite positive about semi-sextiles, 30-degree aspect, but in my experience it's a bad aspect because Venus and Mars are working in different ways, and I think this could have an impact on relationships. Venus and Mars are have different priorities to each other. Venus is in Gemini, Mars is in Cancer. Gemini and Cancer are two very different signs. So relationships may not work as well as expected, and it may just be that there's a temporary mismatch between partners. You and your partner just may have a different way of being, a different way of relating, a different way of wanting attention, that kind of thing, and on quite a physical kind of way. It's just not gonna quite work. But on a positive note, Mercury is making a 45-degree aspect to the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Mercury's on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So that means that in terms of what we say, many of us can be very seductive. If you want to sweet talk someone into doing something, and now may be your chance. If you want to use your words to attract someone's attention, if you want to use your words to seduce, then now might be your chance. It's also about the brain. Mercury is a mental planet, obviously, it being Mercury. So there are going to be a lot of thoughts and fantasies about relationships and sex and that kind of thing, not least because Poseidon, another hypothetical planet, is kind of very fantasy-orientated planet, kind of higher vibration of Neptune, is also aspecting the Venus-Mars midpoint. So our brains and our fantasies could go into overdrive. I don't know, maybe that's not such a good thing. Maybe we need to ground ourselves. So that is pretty much all I've got to say. One other thing. As I was saying earlier, but I got the context wrong. Kronos is on the Mars Hades midpoint, and Witte talks about that as vicious acts by government, which could go so far as judicial murder. So governments can do horrible things, and Kronos on the Mars Hades midpoint is a reminder of that. So if you're in a country where the government has a reputation for heavy-handed tactics, if you're living in a dictatorship, I mean, who isn't nowadays? But just be careful. So as far as the 12 signs are concerned, this time as opposed to yesterday, I've actually written them out. So I'm just going to quickly go through my forecasts for the 12 signs. Aries, 2 stars. In relationships, your sensitivity isn't as good as you think it is. Taurus, 3 stars. I know you have your doubts, but I'm confident you're going in the right direction. Gemini, 2 stars. If you don't do it today, you may never get it together. Cancer, 4 stars. Hang on in there, because things are about to get better. Yes, the moon is about to move into your star sign. Leo, if you did a good job, you'll be rewarded. Reason I say that is because Sun rules Leo, and it's conjunct the North Node. North Node is about good karma, kind of. I mean, it's about going in the right direction. From Leo's perspective, Sun North Node is in the 10th house from Leo. So yeah, so if you've done a good job, you're going to get rewarded. Virgo, 5 stars. Your sex appeal is at the top of the range, and that is because Mercury, your ruling planet, is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Libra, 2 stars. You try to be nice, but someone out there is being seriously annoying. Scorpio, 2 stars. Consider the possibility that you're scaring people off. Sagittarius, 3 stars. You'd better grab their attention before they leave the room. Capricorn, 4 stars. You're starting to attract attention. Aquarius, 3 stars. The work is done. You now need to wait for the results. And finally, Pisces, 3 stars. You can slowly start looking beyond the 4 walls of your own private existence. Now I'm going to move into I Ching world, and I threw my 3 coins. I was asking the question, what is Monday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? So I'm kind of talking about you. So the first hexagram I got was 49, revolution. We're all in a situation where we can change. We can change for the better and, molt our skin, become something else, and, change everything about, everything about our lives. It can happen. But I think it's important to take it slowly, and at the same time, not to be fooled by other people. If we want to change, we might find that other people claim they want to change, but other people are not going to change. They're going to claim to change, but deep down, no, they're not. We were talking about dictatorship and so forth. When you get a change of government, there's always that group of people that change, are quite happy to change. For example, I suppose in Nazi Germany, there were supporters of Nazism, and they went along because it was easy. Then the government changed. If they're in East Germany, it suddenly became a communist government, and these people suddenly changed. They suddenly became communists. Or likewise, if communist government changes, it becomes something else. But it's their personalities and their fundamental nastiness hasn't changed. So bear that in mind, and don't be fooled by people's claims to be different. No, nothing has really changed. Anyway, there's a transition from revolution to grace, and grace is not really about big change. So we have made the change perhaps inside ourselves, but we move to grace. We don't make a big show about it. We know we've changed, but there's no point in telling the world what's gone on inside our soul. We can keep that quiet, at least for the moment. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.